So let's talk about car meets. Now, let's be honest. Right now, car meets don't have the best reputations. Donuts in parking lots, people throwing fireworks at police, people just acting crazy and running each other over, running into cars. Well, from my experience, it wasn't always like that. And I sound like an old timer, but this was just the early 2000s. And I'm going to describe to you a typical car meet that I used to go to in San Antonio, Texas. It was huge. And then we're going to kind of talk about what's going on now. And then I want to hear about your input. And honestly, I just don't go to them anymore. So let's go ahead and talk about how a car meet was when I was growing up. So in San Antonio, Texas, it's a pretty decent sized city and cars were a big thing. The car scene was humongous. We're talking about big. And I had a couple friends, our crew that we always hung around, both with cars, and we'd all do other activities. But on a Saturday, I believe, we would all get together, pretty much the whole city, and we would meet up at a Best Buy. And this Best Buy parking lot was huge because it wasn't just a Best Buy. It was like Best Buy and like some home goods store or something like that, and like a Petco, the typical shopping. But it was humongous. The parking lot was huge. And I remember going there, and there was at least 100 cars. And you got to think about it. That's a lot of cars, and that's at a bare minimum. And the way that the meet was set up is that the cars were kind of categorized. Now, it wasn't isolated. They were all in the same parking lot, but like all the Supras would line up and park with each other. All the motorcycles, all the Ford Lightning trucks and anything like that would line up with each other. Like the Civics and Integras, the Camaros or the Pontiac Firebirds, the WS6s or whatever. They'd all line up. But the cool thing about it is everybody would get out and they would talk to each other, of course, with their crew or their friends. But then you'd walk around and you'd just go check out other cars. And, unless you talk to an owner, they were just there to look at, admire, and if you wanted to talk to somebody, they talked to you. And I remember I used to drive the CRX and I took it to the car meet. It's the first time I saw Supra up close, and they were all lined up, and I thought they were super cool, and I still think they're super cool. But essentially, I remember man, this is cool, and the owners were like, thanks, man, I appreciate it. And I didn't know a lot about him, but if you did have some information or you wanted to ask them, they'd be free to answer that. Now, one of the cool things about it is there wasn't almost no drama. All the cars were parked. But when you would see some cars drive away, and they would drive away calmly and then grouped up together, you knew what they were doing. They were going to go race on the highway. They wouldn't leave the parking lot revving or fast. It was almost unless you were paying attention, you were just thinking, oh, they're just leaving. But the groups of cars would leave together, and then they'd come back, and then they'd park, and then everybody get out, and they'd talk about what happened and stuff like that. But that's how the car meet ran, and it was really neat. Now let's talk about what's going on now. Well, I know with social media, things are more in your face, and sometimes it blows it up more than, makes it seem worse than it really is. But all I've seen is just, it's chaos. It's a circus. People, leaving trash in a parking lot, people fighting, people doing burnouts and trying to drift and running into cars, leaving there, just all kinds of, people starting the drama and just, overly dramatic events. And the crazy part is what I've seen is that some people like that, or maybe they're just young and they enjoy that environment. And then when people get, older, or maybe they're worried about their safety or their car, they don't attend them. So then what happens is you start having a separation of essentially car classes, which nobody likes. Nobody likes elitisms or whatever you call that, classism or whatever. But then what people started to do now, instead of going to these car meets at night, people started going to Cars and Coffee in the morning. And the evolution of it over time was pretty much the really nice cars, like the McLarens and Ferraris and the super nice Supras and GTRs and all those super rare cars. They go to Cars and Coffee, and you rarely see them, at a night meet or something like that, which wasn't the case before. From my experience growing up and being in the Army, I've gone to car meets all over the U.S., essentially a lot of states. And I really think we're at a point now where nighttime car meets is just kind of a chaos, and really that's my perception of it. I could be wrong, but I simply just don't go because, the safety factor. And I think now Cars and Coffee is the thing to go to, but in my opinion, it was cool back then to be able to go to these events because it was more organized and there was more of a respect level for everyone. Everyone knew that, you just respect the environment, and there was no contest about it. There was no like, well, I'm going to go over and do that, because essentially everybody conducted themselves like that. Now, these car life videos are designed to bring up discussion. So I'm really excited. I want you guys to put down in the comments your experience, how you feel about the current environment, and just everything. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening and watching. And don't forget to support the channel by subscribing and sharing these videos. We always appreciate that. You guys take care, and we'll talk to you soon.